For this lesson, we're going to display categorical data in Excel. So you'll want to make sure that you're upgraded to the most recent version of Excel on your device. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a frequency table. Now, if you've downloaded the PowerPoint that accompanies this video, I do have step-by-step instructions on that PowerPoint, but we're just going to do this together. So we're going to make a frequency table for actual weather. So the first thing I want to do, and this is a handy trick, is if I want to select everything in a column, instead of choosing this column, which actually can lead to some errors down the road, I'm going to choose actual weather. And then on mine, I have a Mac, and so I'm going to click Command-Shift down or Control-Shift down if you're a Windows user. And notice what happens is now all of my data has been selected. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a frequency table using the values in that column. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have Excel find out what values I have in this column without me having to go through. So for this one, it's just rain and no rain, so it's not very difficult. But anyway, I'm going to go to my Data tab, and I'm going to click on Advanced. Now notice the list range is already highlighted. That's the values that I had highlighted previously. I'm going to copy to another location, and that location I'm just going to copy to right here. And so what that's going to do is it's going to take whatever values I have and just unique records only, which means no rain or rain happened several times. We don't care, it's just going to give it to me one time. So notice now what happens is I have actual weather, rain, and no rain. So those are all of my categories. Now from here, I want to be able to create the actual frequency table. So I'm going to move this over a little bit, and I'm going to write frequency. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find frequency, I'm going to find relative frequency as a decimal, and then I'm going to find relative frequency also as a percent. Now what I want is I want to not have to find those values myself. So I'm going to write sum down here, and here I'm going to put equals and then Countifs. Now Countifs is a way for your computer to, or for Excel to basically count up how many times something happens. So notice the first says criterion range. That means what value set are we using, and of course that is all of the actual weather data. Again, I used Command-Shift down, and then I'm going to comma, and notice criteria 1 says basically it's going to count if the value is equal to, and I'm going to choose my category, so rain or no rain. And if I take that and then I drag this arrow down, notice what's happening is it created that same formula again. And then for sum, I'm just going to do equal sum and then choose my data values. So that's great for the actual weather and the frequency, but I want to do the decimal and the percent as well. So if I want to do the relative frequency, I'm going to put equals, and then I'm going to take whatever my frequency is divided by the sum. And a handy little trick here is if I put dollar signs in front of the E and the 4, it's going to leave the E4 as a static place. Because if I would have tried to drag this down, it would have taken 331 divided by nothing and given me an error. So on this one, by choosing the dollar sign in front of the E, it tells me to keep that as the E column, and the dollar sign in front of the 4 says we're still using the 4th row. So notice now I've got my decimal values, and then of course I can find equals sum, and that should equal a sum of 1. And then this one is actually easier. I'm just going to do equals whatever's over here, and I'm going to copy that down. And then I'm just going to right click those and format cells and tell Excel I want a percent instead to however many decimal places, and notice it's 100%. Now on the slideshow, I had some nice customizations. So from the Home tab, I can choose that I want, the lines on the outside. I can choose to fill this with, whatever color I feel like filling it with, and now I've got something that's kind of pretty. Now, that's all well and good, and it didn't take forever to do that, but it's still kind of a lot of steps, and I'm kind of lazy and I like to do things as quickly as I can. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pivot table. And so I'm going to choose my data set again and go to Insert, Pivot Table. Now the pivot table is great, and I'll tell you the good and the bad in just a little bit, but let's go ahead and create one. We're going to select all of our weather forecast data for basically for B. And I'm going to choose in my existing worksheet, I'm just going to have it go right here. So I'm just choosing where I want it to go and click OK. Now from here I have to make some choices because as you can see there's no data in my pivot table. The only data I'm choosing from is my actual weather, and I want that to be in my columns and in my rows, and then I'm going to put it here 3 times. And the reason I'm going to put it here 3 times is because I want my rain and my no rain to also then be a relative frequency as a decimal and as a percent. So the first one is the count of my actual weather, and I'm going to leave it just like that. Notice it's a count, so it's exactly what I want. If I wanted to change the field name to frequency, I could do that. For the second one, again, I'm just going to click on the I. And for the second one, I want this to be my relative frequency, but I want to show my data as the percent of the column. Percent of the column. So I click OK, and notice now I've got percent. However, I really wanted that to be decimals, so if I show my data as the percent of a column and then click number and choose decimal or just number instead, and again, however many decimal places I want, let's just go all the way out there, and then click OK, now it sort of matches what I had above. And then for relative frequency, again, I'm going to choose the I, and then show data as the percent of the column, and I just want it to be a percent, and so there's my percent. So as you can see, these are the same data. This one was a little bit faster. Let me show you the difference between the two. If I take my row 6 and change it from rain to no rain, notice this frequency table that I made by hand automatically changed, whereas the pivot table did not. If I want the pivot table to refresh, I have to actually go to refresh all for that to work. So that's the disadvantage of the pivot table, is that you have to remember to refresh so that your values will refresh, but as long as you remember to do that, it's really no big deal. So now, in order to create a bar chart for my data, instead of using all of this data, I'm actually going to use the frequency table I just made. So I'm going to choose my rain and no rain data and my frequencies, and then I can either choose the bar chart, which is fine, or I could choose insert, and then if I just go to recommended charts, it typically recommends what is correct for that sort of data. Now as you can see here, I'm missing a few items. Of course, I would just double click on this to change the title of the chart to whatever we want it to be. If I need to add those data values, the axis labels, I would go to add chart element and go to access titles and just add both of those. I can double click on the bars and vary colors by point, which gives me different colors. I can change the borders over here. I think I can even add data labels by clicking on add chart element and then data labels, and so then I would just add the data labels 331 and 34. You can't really see, but there's all sorts of different options that you can choose there. We're going to do the same thing for a circle graph or a pie graph. I'm going to go to insert and then just click on this circle or pie, and again I can change the chart title. I can choose different values here, so again we're varying the colors by slice, which of course we would want to do here. If I right click, I can add my data labels. If I choose some of the options over here, as you can see, I can choose to show the category name on the pie, which means I wouldn't need this key down at the bottom. I can show the value, I can show the percentage instead if I prefer percent rather than the value, choose where it's located, etc. So there's a lot of different options that are really just sort of whatever your preference is. That's how you create all of those within Excel. For one to try on your own, I would like for you to download the data set that we used previously in our StatCrunch example, which is the blood pressure data, and go ahead and create a pivot table for values under 30 or subjects under 30, a frequency, a bar chart for 30 to 49-year-olds, and then a circle or pie chart for over 50-year-olds. When you're done, you should have values that look like this. So press pause, try all of those, and then press play to check your work. So again, in Excel, I'm being asked to make a pivot table, a bar chart, and a pie chart. And so to make the pivot table, I'm using only the values under 30. So it is important that I only select those values. So I'm going to choose the end of that data and essentially just select all the way to the top. By doing that, then I know I have only the values under 30. Then I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Pivot Table. I've already selected the range I want. I want it to go to my existing worksheet, we'll say in column D, and then click OK. Again, here is where I get to choose what I want where, and so I'm really just worried about the blood pressure data for my rows, and then also for my values. And I can do counts, I can do frequency, relative frequency, etc. So if I want to do all three, I would have to put it in there 3 times. Typically we would just do it 2 times. So we would do like the count and then the relative frequency as either a decimal or a percent. So I'm going to call this the frequency. And then the other one I'm going to call relative frequency. And that one I'm going to choose to show data as the percent of the column because I want it to be a percent, and I'll just leave it as a percent. So that's how easy and quick it is to make a frequency table. The other 2 charts that I need to make are the bar chart and the circle chart using different values. So as you can see, I've created a pivot table for myself just that I don't have to do all of that totaling on my own. So the bar chart that I'm supposed to make is for the people who are 30 to 49. And so I'm just going to select these values, and then I'm going to go to Insert and then Bar Chart, and then again I can just choose to create my title and then add the data labels. I'm going to let you do that on your own. And then to make my circle chart, I would choose the over 50 data and then go to Insert and then a recommended chart and go to a circle. And again, I would change all of my data labels and my title, etc. To the over 50 blood pressure, etc. And I could add those data labels as well that we already went through how to do.